Hey, it's Mike from the Run Testers, and in this video myself and Nick are going to be talking about this watch. This is the Garmin Forerunner 55. Now we kind of did our first look, our early thoughts with this watch, and we've done a couple of comparison videos which are up on the channel now as well. Now we're in a position where we really want to hone in on what the 55 is about. So we'll take you through the kind of key design and features. We'll give you our kind of running test kind of experiences, and we'll get to a verdict over whether you should buy this watch and actually how it compares to some other watches around this price range. So yeah, let's get into it. This is our Run Testers verdict on the Garmin Forerunner 55. So I'll run through some of the kind of key design elements here, and the first thing to kind of really mention is it's very similar to what we got on the Forerunner 45. So there's a 42mm case. It's slightly thicker, but it's not a kind of thickness that you really kind of notice. So that matches the case size of the Forerunner 45, not the 45S, which is a little bit smaller. You've got the same layout in terms of the physical buttons, and they kind of operate in the same way. You've got a 20mm silicone strap, and they use the kind of quick release bands kind of system that Garmin has started to use. It makes them easier to kind of swap out for something else. In terms of the screen, it's the same size screen and resolution as the 45. It's a transflective display, so it's all about kind of boosting those kind of visibility in all conditions, and obviously preserving this kind of strong battery life you get there as well. In terms of the kind of colour options, you've got 4 colour options, colours that have kind of been used in Forerunners before, so nothing radically different there in terms of design really. Around the back you have got Garmin's Elevate heart rate monitor sensor technology, so it's not the latest one that was on the Venue 2, but it's going to kind of offer similar performance when we kind of get into in the kind of run testing part. In terms of charging, it's a pretty much universal Forerunner charging cables. That's good. If someone else has got a kind of recent Forerunner, then, or even a Phoenix or something like that, you should be able to use the same charging cable here. So in terms of design, for me, generally it's a small, light, comfortable watch. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, it's not the biggest screen. I would probably prefer a bigger screen, but generally no major issues to report. It's kind of a Forerunner 45, kind of a little bit thicker, but it's not a major difference. So if you're used to, if you know what that watch is like to use, this is very similar in terms of what you get on the 55. So let's quickly run through the key running features you can expect from the Garmin Forerunner 55 before we get into that testing. First of all, there's GPS, GLONASS and Galileo sensors for tracking outdoor runs. We'll get 5 running profiles, which now includes track running and a virtual running profile for indoor training apps like Zwift. You can view GPS-based distance, time and pace, and record cadence data just like the Forerunner 45. You can pair external chest strap monitors and foot pods, broadcast HR over ANT+, download training plans, and it's compatible with Garmin Coach. Among the new features you didn't get on the 45, you now get daily suggested workouts, an improved recovery advisor, PacePro pacing strategies, a race predictor, and estimated finish times for various running distances. There's also safety and tracking features like live track, incident detection, and assistance modes when you have it paired to your smartphone. On the software front, you're now getting full Connect IQ Store access, and Garmin uses its new glanceable widget user interface, which has appeared on newer Garmin watches too.
Overall, I quite enjoyed running with the Garmin Forerunner 55, and that kind of starts with the very small design that kind of suits my preferences. It sits very nicely on the wrist. I found it really comfortable to wear at all times. It is a bit of a downside that the screen is a bit smaller and not as good as other Garmin's, or even something like the Pace 2 at a similar price. But it was always really clear to read in all conditions. I didn't really mind the screen that much. It's just it could be a little bit better. Accuracy was pretty much on point. I will say the heart rate accuracy was surprisingly good with this watch. I think that's partly because it is so small and sits very nicely on the wrist. Also, I've been using it in the summer when I tend to get better heart rate readings from watches. But yeah, it was pretty much always within a beat or two of a chest strap. Probably long term, if you were going to use things like the recovery advisor very closely, I'd get a chest strap and pair with it. But yeah, accuracy was pretty good, and GPS was always fine. It probably tended to skew slightly generous compared to other watches or compared to my expectations, but within the margin of error, I had no real concerns about GPS or heart rate accuracy with it. I'm a big fan that they've added track run to this watch. It's a useful sports mode that does create quite a lot of accuracy. I did a session this week with another Garmin using track run. I was doing reps of up to kind of 4K in length, and having an accurate lap pace actually made quite a big difference as opposed to having to do the mass every 200 meters. The virtual run mode is also a nice idea that you can use it to control your avatar on something like Zwift. I do like using Zwift when I'm on a treadmill, but I find that pacing from a watch on a treadmill is never accurate enough for me, so you couldn't really use it for any precision if you were on Zwift, I don't think. There's no strength mode on the watch, which is a bit annoying to me. Even as a runner, I do some supportive strength work, and there's only HIIT or other. It's fine to use the other mode, but I'm not doing much HIIT, it's fair to say, and just having the strength mode there would be a useful addition. A lot of the other kind of new stuff on here, I think, really makes it a great watch for beginner runners. The suggested workouts are nice, the Garmin Coach training plans are good, the recovery advice, all quite nice, useful features for kind of beginner or even intermediate runners. It's annoying that the Garmin Coach doesn't have a marathon plan yet. I think that would be a really nice thing to add to the watch. Suggested workouts sometimes throw out slightly wild things, but they're broadly along the lines of, I think, the kind of thing that runners do generally, and it can kind of teach you how to kind of maybe structure a week if you are new to running, in terms of adding in intervals, adding in a tempo run, how much base running you should be doing. It's a shame that you don't get things like the training status on the watch. I know that's kind of reserved for pricier Garmins, but clearly all those kind of calculations are going on behind the scenes to create those suggested workouts. So even just the basic training status page of whether it's productive, that kind of thing would have been, I think, a nice addition. I think it's okay to bring that down to the watch at this level. It's not really taking much away from something like the 245. The race predictor is another, cool. It's another nice thing to have on the watch. I will say Garmin ones have been very harsh on me for quite a while now. I think they're 10 minutes slower than my marathon time, which is run with a Garmin. And even right now, the 5K is slower than the 5K I ran a week and a half ago while wearing a Garmin. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these race predictions generally. One thing I really am a fan of is PacePro. I really think it's a great feature. It's basically a smart pacing band to have during your runs. It's very useful, particularly on undulating races. I've used it at the Loch Ness Marathon and an undulating half marathon, and just being able to ease off on kind of uphill splits without worrying about it, and then put the hammer down on downhill splits, whilst also getting that overall how far ahead you are behind a target time is very useful. And even on flat races, it can I think help you to pace a negative split, which I do think is something that lots of runners struggle with, but especially new runners often go out too fast. I set it up to pace a negative split on the Forerunner 55 to do a Dorney half marathon recently, which is a pancake flat course. I blew up really hard, didn't matter, those splits were meaningless after about 3 or 4 miles because I was just dying. But it's good just to see that progression of pace throughout the race and kind of learn how to kind of do that, and I think that is the way to really run PBs, especially at longer events. So it's nice to have a watch that can guide you through it split by split. Battery life is also solid for me. I had the notifications turned off, and it was getting through a week of training pretty comfortably. If I was running anything from like 70 to 100k a week, it would probably be lasting 7-10 days. It's quite a big jump on the Forerunner 45, which was about 4 to 5 days when I was using it.
So in terms of general running performance, I'm kind of really going to echo a lot of what Nick has already said, and that is that it's pretty solid overall. It's another Forerunner that kind of really does the job in terms of kind of GPS tracking, accuracy, the heart rate monitor performance, and things like battery life as well. I'll start with GPS, and apart from maybe a couple of runs where it was a bit sluggish in terms of kind of locking onto a signal, after that it was fine and it didn't take long to kind of lock on, no problems there. Distance tracking, I compared it to the Garmin Enduro, the Forerunner 45, also the Chorus Pace 2, and I was pretty satisfied in terms of what this watch delivered. Obviously I've raced with it, in a 10k race as well, and it kind of held up on the accuracy front for me as well. Heart rate monitoring, I still say it kind of falls into that bracket of heart rate monitors you get on most Forerunners. It's not the latest kind of tech that's used or featured in the Venue 2, but to be honest, that didn't make a huge difference in terms of my experience. In terms of that performance, I think it's better for best fitted for kind of that steady kind of run kind of scenario. As soon as you go for the high intensity stuff, like Nick has said, grab a chest strap. You can pair a chest strap. I've used a Wahoo Ticker X, a Garmin HRM Pro, no problem in terms of pairing and getting that data, which is more reliable. In terms of battery life for me, so obviously Garmin kind of states here that you can get 2 weeks of smartwatch battery life and 20 hours of GPS battery life, which is up kind of 30 from the 13 hours that you're getting on the 45. And essentially, there's not a huge dent in terms of the battery life in terms of GPS. So an hour's worth of running would probably see the battery for me drop by about 2 to maybe 5% at the most. So it's kind of what you expect from a Forerunner. It holds that battery quite well, and it means it can probably get to that kind of 20 hours of GPS battery life that is stated. In terms of kind of standby time as well, it kind of really depends. I wouldn't say I got 2 weeks. I maybe got short of that. It's definitely a watch that I'd say comfortably it's worth kind of using for a week's worth of training if you're regularly running and tracking runs during that week. If you're kind of scaling back to maybe 2, maybe 3 runs, maybe you're going to get close to that 2 weeks with a bit of the kind of smartwatch stuff going on as well. Essentially, it is a watch that's built for a week's worth of training, and a lot similar to what you got on the 45. You may be getting a little bit more battery life. So beyond that core kind of running experience that you kind of get on the 45 and you get on the 55, it's really about the running focus features that Garmin has kind of brought in over from other Forerunner watches, or more expensive Forerunner watches. So there's things you can do prior to the run, during the run, and after the run. And I think that's what's really going to make the 55 appeal. So the first thing I would say I've kind of really liked, and I think it's a really nice feature to find, is PacePro pacing strategies. Nick's gone into quite a big detail about that, but the fact that that feature initially needed maps, or has used mapping on the other Forerunners that support it, you don't need that on the 55, and you can still get that pacing strategy and something you can follow during a race, which I think is really nice. So in terms of other features that I liked, I think finish time is quite a nice feature. It's not kind of anything groundbreaking, but it's kind of giving you estimates and when you might finish certain distances, and it will actually give you the specific time of the day. So if you've kind of you looked at your watch and you're about to go track for a run at midday, it will give you an idea of when you're going to finish whatever distance you want to go and cover. So it's nice if you're kind of trying to fit something in before a meeting, for example. So a nice little feature. Race predictor, everyone loves a race predictor. I think it's much more reliable in its kind of latest form on the Forerunner 55 and some of the other watches that support that. Things like Recovery Advisor and the daily suggested workouts, I think generally have been pretty kind of reliable for me. The key thing for me is they are guidance. It's different, it's not definitive advice. I think for a lot of people, it might work and it might be exactly what they need in terms of their training and in terms of what they should be doing. But I think use it as a guidance, and you need to make sure that you're putting the right kind of information and data into those features. So things like reliable heart rate and kind of fitness level and kind of what it's taking from your training history to really make those features useful. So across the board, I think those are really nice features. One kind of non-running feature, you can now do pool swimming. I do a lot of pool swimming, so it's nice that that's actually on this watch at this price, where previously it hadn't been. But generally focusing on the running stuff, I think those extra smarts really kind of elevate what the 55 is over the 45. And for me, I think are really kind of positive features to have on this watch.
So the Forerunner 55 is a watch where Garmin has made a lot of useful improvements on the Forerunner 45. I do think quite a few of those updates could have been brought to the 45 in a software update. I think it's a little bit of bugbear of mine that, in a way, it signals that the Garmin is no longer going to be supporting the Forerunner 45, and it brings some questions to the longevity of the 55 if they're already kind of cutting ties with that watch. They could easily have had the track run mode added to it, in my opinion. So yeah, that's a bit of a shame, but there's no doubt that there are a lot of very handy updates on this watch compared to its predecessor, and obviously something like the battery life is something they couldn't have done on the older watch, and that's quite a big jump and a useful one. At £180, it faces very clear competition from the Coros Pace 2. We've talked about this in kind of all our videos on the Forerunner 55. We also have a dedicated head-to-head comparison up there. For me, probably boils down to maybe the kind of runner you are. If you are a more experienced runner, and of course if you're a triathlete, then the Coros Pace 2 just has more features. I think that's just going to appeal to you more, and has the multi-sport mode, obviously. But things like the Evo Lab kind of training analysis is a big step up on what you're getting on the Forerunner 55. And also the fact that Coros brought that to the Pace 2, when it was a new feature launched, they brought it across the range, just signals again that maybe there's a bit more long-term support for their watches in terms of updates. Whereas the fact that Garmin chose to put all the features on the 55 rather than on the older 45, maybe that's something that probably is something that would affect my buying decision. How far into the future am I going to be getting updates on this watch? But yeah, there's still a really clear case for buying the 55 in my opinion, especially if you're a beginner runner. Things like the suggested workouts, all that kind of stuff is really well done on the watch, and it can it's probably a more approachable watch, I'd say, than the Pace 2 if you are someone fairly new to the sport, looking for something to kind of guide your training, help you with racing, all that kind of stuff. I also think it's just a bit more friendly to use. The user experience is a bit better on the Forerunner 55 for me. The 5-button design is part of that, but also just the kind of user interface and all that kind of stuff I think is slightly nicer than on the Pace 2. I kind of feel like, for me, it was almost like a mini Forerunner 935, which was like one of my favourite watches, not only because I've got the watch face set up exactly like I did on the Forerunner 935. So yeah, that was quite an appealing thing to me. I did enjoy using it, and it might be a little bit kind of heart over head, but I think if I just had the choice of the Forerunner 55 and the Pace 2, I probably would lean towards the 55 myself, just because don't use a lot of these extended features necessarily, but I just think the kind of basic user experience on this watch on the Forerunner 55 is a little bit more enjoyable, perhaps. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that Coros is richer in features. So I think if the Forerunner 55 dropped to more like 140, 150 pounds, there's more of a discussion to be had. But at the price point, the sensible decision is probably buying the Pace 2. I also think it's a big enough step up on the Forerunner 45 that I would be suggesting buying the 55. That's unless you can get the 45 maybe for under £100 even, and you're just looking for a really basic beginner running watch. That's still a really great watch of lots of new useful things for runners, including Garmin coaches training plans. So yeah, if you can get it for around £100, the 45 is still a nifty little bargain.
So my verdict on the Forerunner 55 is that once I've kind of stepped back and looked at what has kind of improved or changed from the Forerunner 45, particularly for runners, those kind of more advanced features, running focus features, really kind of make this a compelling watch to kind of own, and I think it makes it great value in terms of what you get. Now, the core running experience feels very similar to the 45, but it's those things like PacePro, pacing strategies, the recovery advisor, daily suggested workouts, finish time, race predictor, all those things which kind of takes us from a basic kind of no frills watch which we got with the 45 to something which you can start kind of applying a bit more kind of structure to your training, understanding what you should do in your training and when you should train. So in terms of what you are getting here and in terms of the money that you're spending, I think this is a really solid watch. Now, Nick has kind of spoken about how these kind of compare to things like the Pace 2 and the 245, which is more expensive. And I think, those same things apply. But if you're looking at something, I think, that's easy to use, and if you want those kind of smarter features, this is a really good watch to consider. Garmin is kind of, I think, offering more value for money than they have with the 45, and I think if you really want it basic, go for the 45 and you can probably pick that up for cheaper. But if you want something that has that kind of core experience, but also can elevate that with kind of more smarter running focus features, then I would say go for the Garmin Forerunner 55. So there you have it. That is mine and Nick's take on the Garmin Forerunner 55. Now, if you've got any questions about our testing or any of the other features included on the 55, let us know in the comments. We do have a couple of comparison videos, obviously with the Forerunner 45 and the Coros Pace 2, which are similarly priced, so definitely check those out for a more in-depth comparison. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos, and yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.